watching The Citizen Report, real, in-depth American.
Welcome to The Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon. Thank you for joining me today. As always, this newscast is real, in-depth American. It's always good to be back here with you. Thank you so much for joining me. So, as you can probably tell, I'm sure most of you are aware of this. I've been off air for a while, and things have been kind of crazy in my personal life. I do apologize for the lack of broadcasts lately. But it was necessary for that period of time. But I am very glad to be back here with you, and I want to get right into what I want to talk about tonight. And there's no shortage of news I could talk about, but the thing I really want to get into with this broadcast, it has to do with the hantavirus. And I kind of jokingly said to someone not to belittle any loss of life, but it's like they have run out of things to do, the deep state that is, to counter the uprising of people around the world that have had enough with the deep state. And so they've come up with the rat virus. And that's they're kind of running out of ideas at this point, aren't they? And we can see the deep state is panicking. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Now, before I really get into the material here, I just want to say, and I'll get deeper into this as I go forth later in the broadcast, but they're basically saying that the war in Iran is going sideways. It's not going the way Trump wanted it to go. And I would just urge caution for my audience that things are not all what they seem to be. Sun Tzu, The Art of War: appear weak when you are strong, strong when you are weak. And I think that is a principle of warfare that indeed may be in play here. But for now, let's just talk about the hantavirus situation. I'm going to put this up on screen. And by the way, you don't notice it here visually, but I've reworked some of the equipment here. I hope the workflow is a little bit better. Occasionally the camera glitches, but other than that, we're pretty good shape here. But this is the situation. This is kind of in the eastern Atlantic, and they're claiming that there's a hantavirus outbreak, and I kind of nickname it the rat virus. And this is the ship that allegedly this virus is kind of perpetuating itself, basically. And so this became active as of 1 April 2026. Funny enough, it's April Fool's Day, and confirmed cases they claim to be 9. Suspected cases, whatever that means, they claim this have not been confirmed by laboratory tests as being due to this strain, although some other strains may have been ruled out, and that is a count of 2 there. And then deaths are 3. Now, any loss of life is unfortunate, and I don't want to belittle that. I want to obviously acknowledge that in full and not, act like any loss of life is somehow less, of an issue than larger loss of life. But we know what the playbook is here, folks, and it was kind of like the bread and butter here on the Citizen Report for a number of years now. And, basically for a while, this broadcast really talked about the C-19 thing. Now, I should also mention, I'm going to choose my words carefully because this is YouTube, and the algorithms don't particularly take too kindly to criticism of the mainstream health narrative, shall we say. But this is what Al Jazeera is saying about it, and I just find the headline rather interesting. I need to adjust something actually real quick, but basically they say why the hantavirus outbreak is different from COVID-19. Experts say the transmission of hantavirus is so rare that a pandemic is nearly impossible. Now, this is what they say right now, that it's nearly impossible. Now, I find it interesting that this is kind of a parallel, not a strict parallel, but if you remember early on during the C-19 emergence in very late 2019, just as this broadcast was relaunching, as I recall, at first they were not really playing it up as being, severe outside of being a local event in Wuhan, China. And then the narrative shifted as everyone, is all too familiar with. But, you know, I just want to put this up on screen straight away, and I want to say this because I think it's important to remind my audience. It is a meme, but it's a good one. Just a reminder, a genuinely deadly pandemic doesn't require 24/7 advertising to remind you it exists. Real pandemics don't need marketing campaigns and endless propaganda, but psychological operations do. So, in more ways than one right now, indeed, what we are seeing, in my opinion, is a psychological operation. Now, it's not just with the rat virus, hantavirus. We're seeing it with certain influencers on social media. We're seeing them dividing people, both on the left and the right. And basically what's happening is people are being convinced that the problem is the problem when it's something else entirely. Let me get into that a little bit more later, but that's just a bit of an appetizer of something I want to get into later on in the broadcast. But this is something that I found very interesting, and I'm not hearing anyone really talking about this yet. This is NBC 10 Boston reporting on this, and their headline, the wording itself, I think is very interesting, and this is what it says. Boston influencer who was on board hantavirus hit cruise ship shares his story. Jake Rosemarin, who gained national attention in the early days of the crisis after posting videos on social media from there's a typo there, from aboard the ship, they meant to say, spoke with Today on Tuesday morning. So this guy is being paraded out there basically as this guy is basically, you know, a victim. He's been exposed, and I want to be very careful with my language and be clear in my intent here. I am not saying that he's not going through something serious. I can't imagine going through a quarantine situation where you would be potentially subjected to infringement of your liberties for as much as 40 days. I think I heard one person claim it could go for 6 weeks. But the thing that I found interesting about this is, of all the people on the ship, and by some accounts, I believe it was over 100, if I remember correctly. I don't have the number right in front of me. Someone can correct me, and please do if I get that number wrong. But basically, there's a lot of people on the cruise ship, and yet you have one person being put out there. He is the spokesman for this whole virus we're supposed to all freak out about now. And again, this is not a slight to this person individually. I just want to point out something, that this guy is on Instagram, and I took the time to look this up before I went live. Wrong button there. Let me take it full. But basically, this guy has 86,000 followers. Okay, so he is an influencer. That's what we call social media influencers. And he is basically, from what I can best gather, a full-time travel influencer. Basically, he goes around and travels and takes, pictures and shares them on social media. And that's what he does. And the problem with that, though, is, like I said, there's only one person, and then it's like, if you look just below the hood, a little closer at what they're presenting to the mainstream masses, it's like they're using one influencer who is, by the way, trained in putting things out there on social media, and then we're supposed to. That's the only thing we have. We don't have a second, third person. Maybe we will in coming days, but so far I have only seen this one person say, "I'm here I was on the hantavirus, ridden ship, and this is my experience." And you would think CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, CNN, whatever, all the alphabet Operation Mockingbird media networks, you would think that they would be interested in talking to other witnesses. Let's get their angle of it. Perhaps someone was afflicted with the virus, but they're overcoming it. Maybe they would want to talk to such person. It's been long enough now. You would think you would start to hear something about that, but apparently not, at least so far. Now, this is going to knock the socks off your feet. what I'm about to share with you. And before anyone accuses me of sharing, doctored AI slop, I'm just going to shut it down here before I even show this. I went to the U.S. Patent Office database, and it was not easy, but I found it. There is actually a 2025, making sure I have it up correctly. There we go. I know that's hard to read there, but I'm showing this first as proof that I'm not just pulling this out of a hat, not sharing this from second, third sources. This is the direct database that basically last year, the University of Texas, and I'll share it in a second, but as of April 2025, came up with an mRNA vaccine against hantavirus. Now, I don't know about you, but it's awfully coincidental that about a year later we have the hantavirus all of a sudden come out of nowhere. And now I'm going to go to this. Let's see. Let me put it up on screen. There we go. U.S. Patent Application Publication. Publication date April 24, 2025. And I'm just going to read this for the record. It's US 2025-01-27870A1. mRNA vaccines against hantavirus. Applicant, Board of Regents, the University of Texas System, Austin, Texas. And apparently this had been in some way, shape, or form in the works since 2022. And another date here, 2024, and then it, I guess, became a full-blown patent last year, which is 2025. So the fact that we have a hantavirus pandemic come out of nowhere, and they just have the wisdom to know that a hantavirus was on the horizon, and they needed to come up with something, and by golly, they got it about a year before. I mean, I don't know about you. That seems a little suspicious, if you ask me. I don't know. I'm just saying I've been around in this business long enough to notice patterns, and this is certainly what I would call a pattern here. Now, you can discount this all you want. That's your constitutional First Amendment right to do so. I'm just saying, there's something here, and it's kind of suspicious. So, something else that has been making the rounds lately, and this is actually an old X post. It may have been even Twitter back at this point. I don't remember exactly when. I forget when exactly Twitter became X, but in the last 5 years, right? Basically, an anonymous poster, don't know the real identity, don't know the context really all that much, but this person put this post up, and I saw this on the PBD podcast, I think, or heard about it. That's one of the podcasts I listen to in my free time. And this is what the post says. It's very simple. I'll just put it up on screen, take it full, actually. This is Soothsayer at I Am a Soothsayer on X. And this is from June 11th, 2022, 2023. And then this is what the post says. Very simply, as you can read along with me, 2023, Corona ended. 2026, hantavirus. So, I don't know. Seems kind of suspicious. And then let's go back to this page. Oh, look at there. 2022 was when, I guess, this process got started for the patent. And then for the hantavirus vaccine. And then and then the post here is from 2022, some 3 months before the process, I guess, got started on the patent side of things. So, interesting. Like I said, more patterns lining up. So, very interesting. Now, that's kind of the primary source material part of this podcast, but what I want to talk about next is more, how should I say this? Basically, this has more to do with more, dare I say, conspiratorial type of stuff. This is not like a smoking gun type of thing, but I just thought I would include this because I thought this was interesting. Someone made these connections. So, of course, everyone knows in 2001 we had 9/11. The Twin Towers got hit by the airliners. You had the Pentagon hit with an airliner. You had Flight 93 go down in rural Pennsylvania, farmland. So everyone knows about that. Okay. Now, what is interesting is hidden in plain sight on the U.S. coinage, the quarters. So, everyone knows, every American knows that we had, for years, we had quarters that basically commemorated states over a number of years, right? The state quarter program. And basically in the year 2001, interesting, you had New York, okay, all right, no big deal. You had North Carolina, you had Rhode Island, you had Vermont, you had Kentucky. Now, someone pointed this out from a visual standpoint. Now, other people have pointed out things in the past where if you fold up dollars, or I think it's a $20 bill or something, you get like, the plume of smoke, you can go find that in your own free time. But someone pointed out the Vermont one as looking a little bit like Twin Towers, made to look like trees. Now, of course, I know, no biggie there. Now, the thing that I found interesting, and I'm only showing that as kind of like an establishment of a potential pattern here. Now, in 2020, of course, that was the year that we had the COVID, just running rampant everywhere. And here's the thing. Let me just remind my audience, in case because this detail got lost in the details, as time went on. But basically, the earliest allegation was that COVID-19 emerged from basically came from bats in Wuhan, China. I'm oversimplifying how they explain that or claim that that's what happened. But anyways, in 2020, by this point, of course, we're not doing the state quarters anymore. But what we are doing is like other things. And I think during this period of time, we were commemorating national parks. It's certainly in this case. And this one is commemorating American Samoa National Park. Let's look at it. You have bats. Isn't that interesting? I don't think that's... I don't know about you. That doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. Because it's like I said, it's so fascinating to me. You have parallels when things are happening in the news cycle. You have the main news event. But then you have parallels that you just look at it and you're like, that doesn't quite make sense how that would be a pure coincidence. But hey, just putting it out there. Now, one more thing I want to show. This is from, this year. And this is about the best I could come up with for the graphics of it. Now, this is a quarter, and we're, of course, celebrating the 250th anniversary or birthday of the United States of America. And, there's a number of different things that are happening, all across society to celebrate that, to mark the 250th, one of which, of course, is the coins. And so this, on it at face value, pardon the pun, this would be another commemoration of our American heritage, our history. And this is something that is being put out there this year, of all years. The Mayflower Compact. You have the ship, and what do you have in the news cycle? You have a ship, hantavirus. Interesting, right? Again, may not be anything there, but I'm just saying. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to look at that for a few minutes. But anyways, I won't spend more time on that. But what I want to get to next, hopefully that provided a moment of levity there. But what I want to get to next here is something that has to do with, again, not so much, I don't know if the word is predictive programming, that kind of could kind of sort of fit in this case. But what you have then is you have a investigative journalist, a writer by the name of Annie Jacobson. I mentioned her work before, and she does good work, and I have actually read and listened to her audiobook, Nuclear War, A Scenario. That came out about 2 years ago. And not for the faint of heart, I might say. But she basically has sort of amalgamated her whole body of research and kind of distilled it into sort of like a scenario, applying that knowledge into a what-if scenario. So like I said, you had the Nuclear War, A Scenario, published in 2024. Now it's still in pre-order, but it's coming out in late July. And I thought this was kind of interesting. I heard about the book. I knew about the book before this, but I think it takes on a bit more of an interesting twist of things now that you think about it, with all the stuff going on about hantavirus right now and claiming that if you do catch it, it's potentially worse than COVID. Although they are saying for now that it's harder to get to begin with. At least that's their narrative for the day. But this is biological war, a scenario. Let's put this up on screen as soon as I get things adjusted. But basically, again, by Annie Jacobsen. I just want to read this for you and make it what you will, is all I'll say. But basically, here's what it says. From Annie Jacobsen, the author of the best-selling Nuclear War: A Scenario, a book on a subject that has long orbited her reporting, biological warfare. A lab accident, a bioattack, a global pandemic, and the collapse of human society. In this essential new book, based on dozens of new interviews with experts with high-level political, governmental, medical, and military responsibility, Annie Jacobsen examines this very scenario. It would be only a matter of days from such a global infection before the infrastructure built to handle this gravest of situations would be in a battle for human existence. The fallout, mass death, total societal breakdown, widespread insurrection, anarchy in a plague-ravaged wasteland that no longer resembles modern civilization. In other words, dystopia. Following the gripping narrative style that launched Nuclear War to the New York Times bestseller list, Jacobsen looks deeply at a situation that is in some ways the opposite of a nuclear bomb. There is no mushroom cloud, no shock wave or blast. Instead, the scenario that could end the world as we know it begins with something so small and something so malicious that when used for evil, only evil can result. This is what could happen. A ticking clock roadmap to the hours, days, and weeks following the release of a biological agent that serves as the most essential forward-looking journalism in preparation for urgent societal upheaval. So that is a very interesting kind of like a preview of that book that has yet to be released. And I personally probably will read this, and I, would encourage my audience, don't read anything like that unless you know that you're how should I say this? That you're not letting fear take over, because I think it's very easy, especially with the mainstream media and all the media, and that includes book publishing, of course, but how they kind of perpetuate this sense of doom and gloom, and just in more ways than one. And whereas as a Christian, we can actually be sure of the fact that whatever happens, God is in control, and that God is the sustainer of humanity, if you want to think of it that way. And so for me, I can read this book because I can also look at it from the perspective of, okay, what does the deep state want to... Because they have to kind of tell you before they try to do something. Because in their view, if they tell you, even if it's not exactly presented as a, this is what we're going to do to you or try to do to you, then they think essentially it's fair game to go ahead with it. Now, the thing about that is God will not just let the deep state do anything and everything at once. Now, yes, during the tribulation, God will kind of take his hand off things, and in fact, his judgment will be poured out upon the earth. And that in that time, yes, there will be basically a removal of all limitation, except for the fact that if Jesus does not ultimately return, humanity will end up unaliving itself, basically. So it's important to kind of look at things from that lens, that context, and not just get drawn into whatever anything and everything the mainstream Mockingbird media would have you to believe. Now, I am not here saying, by the way, that Annie Jacobsen, as a footnote, I'm not saying Annie Jacobsen is herself part of all of that. But I think both can be true at once. She's presenting, as best as I can tell, in good faith research, kind of book But the deep state is also in tandem, putting out messaging that, hey, we want to do this to the planet. Okay, so as crazy as that may sound, but again, we are not in a natural war. We are in a spiritual war. The war is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. So we have to always remember that this is not just simply about tit for tat, natural stuff. This is all spiritual ultimately, and we have to remember that. And until you understand that that's how things really work, things aren't going to make a whole lot of sense. Only to a certain point, but not beyond that, in my opinion, at least. Now, this is what they're saying here. Raw's alerts on X. It's kind of like just a general, breaking news kind of stuff, type of account on X. This is what it says as of today. Breaking: Some health experts, now have suggested and issued warning that the hantavirus may be more contagious than thought. Well, that kind of figures. I mean, like I said, they're just kind of getting their messaging going here. I think that this is going to end up potentially being something more in terms of, because they're panicking because, for one thing, they're losing control of the central banking system, and that to them is everything, because everything flows through that. The Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, he's on the verge of being out the door, and Trump's got someone else. I forget the name of him. He's not yet someone I've front of mind would remember his name, but Trump has a nominee that he's going to put in that apparently is more closely aligned with the America First MAGA agenda. Now, they're panicking because in the Middle East, I will also add this, if you noticed, and this is, over the last month and a half, I haven't been doing broadcasting, not just because of my personal circumstances, but also because there is something called the fog of war, and it's very hard to discern things when that's all going on. But you had a I believe it was the Lloyd of Austin, or Lloyd. I was about to conflate that with the former Secretary of Defense. The Lloyds of London, excuse me. Lloyds of London. That's this might make the blooper reel, but the Lloyds of London, basically, they were providing insurance policies, as I, on a very basic level, I understand. They used to provide insurance for ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. They canceled that because the deep state wanted to control the situation and stop Trump from advancing forward with his agenda and fleshing out the deep state aspect of Iran, the IRGC and everything. And then if you notice, Trump, the Treasury Department comes in and says, okay, you're going to do that? We'll provide insurance policies. And I don't think the deep state really expected all of that to happen. I really don't believe that that is something that they would have expected, to have occurred here. Now, one thing and this kind of touches on the peripherals of something I'm going to mention just a bit in just a couple of minutes, but I want to mention something, and I'm not going to take a lot of time here before I go any further into that topic, and that is regarding the health situation, the hantavirus, the rat virus. This is kind of what the Rockefellers and the deep state, this is their plan here. They want to control your cells using 5G and mRNA. I think I've already said too many keywords here in this broadcast. I'm probably going to have the algorithms going nuts on this video. But basically, this is what they want to do. They want to remotely, quote, modulate and direct cellular activities using ferritin nanoparticle compositions. And this even gets as sinister as controlling and manipulating, or trying to do that, human behavior, hormones, and cells with a single signal. So basically, if you've taken the clot shot, my advice to you, not a doctor here, you might want to consider a detox regimen, perhaps, fasting. I've heard that is pretty effective with flushing out spike proteins, not just from the clot shot, the jibby jabber, but also the actual virus itself, the COVID virus at least. So, you go do your own research and you come to your own discernment, your own conclusions through the help of the Holy Spirit. But I'm just saying that's something to look into if you've already taken it. There is hope for those, I think, if you've already taken the shot. Just don't take any more, in all seriousness. But getting closer to the end of this broadcast, but I still have a couple more things I want to share with you today. The first thing is something that I caught my attention from His Glory broadcast. He has on Julie Green quite often on his broadcast. I believe every Wednesday. This is, and they're touching on, and I'm going back now to the economy aspect. This is what I find to be kind of interesting with respect to everything that's going on, because I mentioned everything is not what it seems to be right now. And, you see the gas prices. I know here, gas prices in Tennessee are above $4 a gallon. And it's absolutely crazy. It's really just kind of wild. And you might be thinking, oh, Trump, he's the cause of this. And it's like, be careful about that. Let's listen to this. And I think that when you hear this, if you have the Holy Spirit inside of you, I think this is going, you let me know what in the comment section, or, however you choose to contact me. Let me know what you think about this, because I think this is pretty interesting what is said here in this exchange. Take a listen.
We have live feeds in here. I was just watching ABC, and ABC came out with a poll that said 62% of Americans disapprove of President Trump. And I'm thinking, you know what? This doesn't make any sense, because President Trump is a lot smarter than people give him credit for. And he's got this timed perfectly. Any other president would have walked away from this Iran deal just to try to save the midterms. We're running out of time, but you know what? God's timing is always perfect. I think May 17th is going to be a significant event. And then after May 17th, things will fall in place for the greatest July 4th we've ever had.
Mm-hmm. And something else, I think what's happening with oil prices, and that's some reasons why people are turning against President Trump, that's a trap. I will tell you, it's a trap set for the oil companies. They have no idea what they just did yet. They will figure it out here soon. But the oil companies fell into that trap, because Trump is going to play a trump card at some point. He is going to prove that the oil companies are gouging. There is no reason for them to raise the prices of oil because of what's happening in Iran. We have enough oil reserves in our own nation. We have enough oil production in our own nation that it would not change one thing. And so what they're doing is they're playing a game, and this game, they are definitely going to lose. And I want to reiterate the fact of God giving many different prophetic words about the oil industry, how evil the oil industry is, and about how oil is going to be ripped. And I'm being forcibly ripped from our enemies' hands. We're going to start seeing things in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East. We're going to see things that are happening across the world that's going to take it from the enemy's hands and put it into our hands, and also in Israel. So, which you talked about, Zion National Gas, oil and gas. And so that is a huge part. But there's also something that's going to happen in our nation as well. God is even saying he is going to fault lines and earthquakes. Things are going to shift. The tectonic plates are going to shift this oil into the hands of God's people.
Okay, and I'll stop it there, but go listen to that broadcast in your own spare time. I think it was a pretty good one. Those never disappoint from His Glory with Julie Green. And I think that when it comes to what is happening in the gas side of things, I know that's a big deal, so I felt like I had to bring that up today. For one thing, the gas companies are complicit. They're not just putting prices into place that are purely based on market situations. They are gouging. They are pricing things far above what they should be, fair market value and things like that. The law of supply and demand is not such where they have to raise prices to the degree that they are. And because we have a lot of gas here in this country. Now, other countries, I don't know. I couldn't tell you how that would work there, but at least as far as our country goes, we have considerable oil infrastructure, especially from the Gulf, and increasing all the time now. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all kind of unravels for the deep state, as they will, I do believe, will lose the narrative on this at some point in the not too distant future. And so, we'll see what happens. I think when all is said and done, history, when it's written, it's going to look very different from what is being said right now. And the deep state, like I've told my audience before, what you're seeing being dealt with is not the government of the Iranian people. You're seeing what the deep state had put into place. Let's go back in time a little bit. I'll just be very brief in recapping this. In the 50s, you had the deep state overthrow the government then and put in the what ended up being the final Shah of Iran, and to do the deep state's bidding. Eventually, the Shah of Iran decided, I want to do more things for Iran, for my own country. And the deep state didn't like that too much. So what did the deep state do? They brought up this uprising, this revolution that was not organic. It was deep state. It was a deep state event, false flag type of event. And therefore we have a regime in place in Iran that is at the behest of the deep state, basically. The deep state is not a country. This deep state is not a system. I know people, and this is kind of where it gets into the little bit. I won't spend much time on this today because I've already been going a while today. But basically, you have influencers saying it's, all, like, for instance, they're saying it's all Israel and it's all, all about that. I'm not saying that there isn't truth to that, but what I am saying is it's not, you got to think of this as the problem is not the problem. The enemy is not the enemy. The deep state has done a very good job, by the way, of getting all of us to think, oh, this is who we need to focus on, when in reality, behind the scenes, the deep state, which is no country, it is the devil system that has infiltrated most, if not all, countries around the world. This is a spiritual war that is up against the deep state, which has, like I said, infiltrated all countries, most or all countries. And, it is, that is something where, I need to still dig in a little deeper to before I, go completely explicit in what I could say about the matter. But just suffice to say for today, it is not a single country. It is a globalist system. It's not, one country's flag, being attempted to be put all around the world. It is a globalist system. And in fact, globalists, if they could, they'd do away with nationalism. They would do away with national sovereignties around the world. They don't like countries having their own sovereignty. And in fact, I was listening to, I believe this was the PBD podcast, and this was, I forget the woman's name, but she was being interviewed a couple weeks ago, how, talking about the deep state, and how they've, basically Trump is now dealing with these countries instead of being like chopped up entities that make no sense, if you compare the map to the actual people there. Trump is actually, going to Saudi Arabia and other countries and saying, I want to deal with you as a sovereign country, not as a, basically not as a, something to be pillaged, basically. And so I think we're seeing things happening that are not what is, not what is the mainstream media will certainly not report on it. And that's kind of what I wanted to say on that point for at least for today. I am not saying there isn't truth to what people say with respect to Israel. I'm not saying that, but you have to stop thinking about one country or another country. It is a globalist system infiltrating all countries. And yes, post World War II, you had the globalists dividing things up, making lines on a map, and they had their intentions. But God will still work for his glory, though despite all of that, God will still get the glory, and it will not ultimately go the way the globalists would otherwise have it. So I think that kind of, that's kind of what I wanted to say there. I want to finish on this final note here, because I know things are kind of crazy right now. My personal life, kind of crazy right now. I think for, most of my audience, especially here in the United States, it's kind of crazy right now. And, we can all get discouraged, but I want to remind my audience of a very important verse. This comes up in my spirit quite often, and especially when times get a little difficult, but this is the verse I want my audience to remember. This is 2 Corinthians 4, chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. This is what it says. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. So, basically, as you look at this, it's, you have all kinds of stuff taking place. It's kind of like, it reminds me also in the Old Testament how, basically, I believe it was Elijah, ran off, into a cave. It's kind of like, God spoke, but after quite a bit of calamity, but God was not in the calamity, in the earthquake, I believe it was a fire and things like that. I didn't pull that verse up, but I just now remembered that. But, you got to remember, with all these news cycles, it's easy to become discouraged, to look at the gas prices, become discouraged. It's easy to look at the situation. It's like, I know that just yesterday, I'm going to share this. I'll keep it kind of more general than specific, but, we had a appraisal here where I live, county-wide. I don't want to say exactly where I'm at, but I'm in Tennessee. And appraisal before was $250 or somewhere above $250,000, and now the appraisal is over $400,000. Same house. The only thing that changed, hopefully I'm not sharing too much information, but the house that is now, did change hands because of the passing of my grandmother. But other than that, the house is exactly the same. There's no renovations or anything crazy like that. So when you really look at stuff like this, where you have like not just a little jump, but like 150,000 jump in the appraisal of a property, or the, and then you look at the gas prices, and then you look at what's costing, and things are costing in the grocery stores, etc. That's not necessarily a sign, you got to look a little deeper than just it being all about the war in Iran, because I think what's happening is we are seeing the transformation of our financial system, and I do think we're going to go back to the gold standard. I really do. I've heard people say that, and I do believe that is what's going to be happening here in the not too distant future. But the U.S. dollar is not the dollar. It's a Federal Reserve note. It is literally an instrument of debt loaned at an interest rate from the Federal Reserve Bank, and it's not federal. It's not the American People's Reserve. So, very important to keep those things in mind. Things are not what they seem to be, but just know God is in control. He's always in control. And God knows what's best, and all will be well. So on that note, I think I'll wrap it up there, but God bless each and every one of you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you made it to the end of this broadcast, really do appreciate you sticking with me here. And if you don't mind, give me a little subscribe there on YouTube. Go to thecitizenreport.net. There you can get, of course, all the links to all the broadcasts, and like Facebook and Rumble as well. So on that note, I hope to be back with you very soon here on the Citizen Report. And if you would, I will just say here at the very end, if you would just keep me in prayer. I'm going to keep this kind of general, but things have been pretty intense of late. For good reasons, and maybe also not for so good reasons. But I know that God is in control. The enemy is panicking, not just from a national level, but in individual lives, as the enemy knows that he is losing ground. We are to take ground as Christians, and not just sit back and let things, happen. We are called to take ground, and so as a result, the enemy will try to throw up things, and anyways, if you feel led to, just keep me in prayer on a general basis. That would be much appreciated. And like I said, I will see you hopefully very soon once again here on the Citizen Report. I'm not ready just yet to commit to a regular schedule for this broadcast, but I do hope it will not be long before my next episode. And like I said, I have new equipment here, or not new equipment. I have one new thing here, but to help me manage my workflow just a little bit better. But basically, I've kind of reworked this, recalibrated things, and hopefully it's a little bit better now as time goes forward. As we go forth here on the Citizen Report. So, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you right back here again next time. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.